Hey there, and welcome back. I'm so glad you could join us for another deep dive. Today we're tackling a subject I know you're all deeply interested in.
Men's rights.
Yes, exactly. Specifically, how societal structures impact those rights. We're going to be unpacking some heavy ideas here,
Yeah, absolutely we are.
so get ready.
Buckle up.
To help guide us through this complex terrain, we'll be looking at the Iron Man, restoring male leadership in a feminized society.
By Conrad Riker.
Great book.
This book dives right into some seriously controversial territory. Riker's central argument.
That we need to restore
Yeah.
male leadership in a society that he sees as increasingly dominated by feminist ideologies.
And that's a perspective that's going to resonate with a lot of you guys out there.
For sure.
Especially those of you who are actively working to understand and renegotiate your own covert contracts.
Absolutely.
Now, Riker kicks things off with a bold statement about the evolutionary advantages of male leadership. He says,
Go ahead.
standing next to every successful man, there's another man who cleared the path. Wow.
It's provocative,
Yeah,
but it lays the foundation for his whole argument.
right away.
So,
What's interesting here is how Riker links this to evolutionary psychology and the idea that men are by nature wired to lead.
okay.
He brings up David Geary's male investment theory, which argues that certain male traits,
Like what?
think physical strength, spatial awareness, a drive to compete historically, made men better suited for leadership roles.
When you think about the historical context, it makes sense.
Totally.
I mean, back in hunter-gatherer times,
Yeah.
it was men who were out there hunting, protecting the group, taking those risks.
Right.
So it makes sense that those skills would translate into leadership roles.
And Riker doesn't just stop at the dawn of man.
No.
He points to ancient civilizations too. Rome, Greece, Egypt,
Right.
all led by men. He's making the case that male leadership has been the norm for a very long time.
But, and this is where I think it gets really interesting, how does that historical context play into the challenges men face today? I mean, we're not living in ancient Rome anymore.
Exactly. And this is where Riker introduces the concept of the beta male and the struggles these men experience in a modern society that seems to be pushing back against traditional masculinity.
So let's break that down. I know that's a term that gets thrown around a lot, especially in online spaces like the red pill community.
Yeah.
What exactly does Riker mean by beta male?
Well, he describes it as a double bind. Society wants men to be vulnerable, but then mocks them when they show vulnerability.
Okay.
They're expected to be strong and assertive, but then they're criticized for being too traditionally masculine.
It's like they're being told to be one thing, but then punished for actually being that thing?
Right.
That's got to be incredibly frustrating.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially for men who are already questioning their place in the world.
Yeah, and that frustration is something that Riker really taps into. He then moves into this idea of everyday emasculation, drawing on personal anecdotes and observations to illustrate his point.
Interesting.
He talks about this guy, Tom,
Okay.
who's a huge football fan, but his girlfriend constantly puts down his interest, making him feel like less of a man for enjoying something so stereotypically masculine.
We all know a Tom, right? That guy whose interests get constantly dismissed or belittled.
Exactly.
Because they don't fit into some narrow definition of what's acceptable for men.
That's Riker's point.
Okay.
He argues that these seemingly small incidents of emasculation, especially when they happen repeatedly, can really chip away at a man's confidence and self-worth.
Yeah.
Death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Makes you think, have you ever felt like your interests or passions were dismissed or belittled just because they weren't considered masculine enough?
It's a question worth reflecting on, for sure.
Especially as you navigate, the complexities of relationships and societal expectation.
Absolutely.
Riker doesn't stop there. He goes on to explore how this emasculation plays out in other areas of men's lives.
Right.
Particularly in the workplace and family dynamics.
Yeah, this is where his arguments start to align even more closely with the experiences of men in the married red pill community.
Okay.
Think about the covert contracts many of you are trying to unravel.
Right.
Those often involve power imbalances within relationships, leading to a feeling of being stifled or controlled.
And those dynamics often mirror the broader societal trends that Riker's highlighting.
Absolutely.
It's like the personal and the political are intertwined in this really complex way.
Yeah. So this leads us to Riker's next big point, masking masculinity.
Okay.
He argues that men are under constant pressure to suppress their true selves to conform to what society expects of them.
He even discusses the potential impact on men's mental health.
Oh, yeah.
Referencing the work of Lewis Howes.
Right.
And he shares this startling statistic.
Yeah.
Men are more likely to die by suicide than women.
That's right. And Riker suggests that this pressure to conform to a certain ideal of masculinity could be a contributing factor. An ideal that often denies men the space to express their emotions and vulnerabilities.
It's heartbreaking to think about men struggling in silence,
Yeah.
feeling like they can't be their authentic selves without facing judgment or ridicule.
It underscores the importance of creating spaces where men feel safe to express their emotions, their vulnerabilities, their full range of human experiences.
Riker then turns his attention to a topic that I know hits close to home for many in the married red pill community.
What's that?
The legal system,
Yeah.
and specifically what he calls the divorce racket.
He doesn't mince words here.
No, he does not.
He points to a study by the American Psychological Association
Okay.
that found women are granted custody in 81% of divorce cases.
That's a huge number.
It is.
And Riker argues that this, along with alimony laws, creates a system that disproportionately disadvantages men,
Right.
often leaving them financially and emotionally drained after a divorce.
He suggests that the legal system, especially when it comes to family law, is biased against men, further contributing to the sense of emasculation and disempowerment that he's been outlining throughout the book.
I think this is where his arguments are going to resonate the most with our listeners.
Probably so.
Many of you are actively working to understand the historical and societal forces that have shaped the covert contracts you're now trying to renegotiate.
Yeah.
And Riker's analysis of the legal system provides a lot of food for thought.
It really does.
He's providing a framework for understanding how these larger systems have impacted the personal experiences of men. And that understanding can be incredibly empowering.
Oh, for sure.
Especially when it comes to advocating for change.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we covered a lot of ground already.
Yeah.
Evolution, beta males, emasculation, the legal system.
You've been busy.
Where does Riker go from here?
Next up, he dives into a topic that often sparks debate.
What's that?
Hypergamy. He defines it as women's tendency to marry up in terms of social status and resources.
Hypergamy.
I knew you'd like that.
I knew this was coming.
Here we go.
It's a concept that gets a lot of attention.
So much attention.
Especially in online communities like the Red Pill subreddit.
Right.
So how does Riker approach it?
Well, he frames it through the lens of evolutionary psychology,
Okay.
arguing that this desire to marry up is a deeply ingrained biological drive in women, something that's been shaped by centuries of mate selection.
It makes sense when you think about it from a historical perspective.
Right.
Women were often dependent on men for protection and resources.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that they would be drawn to men who could provide those things.
Exactly.
And Riker argues that this biological drive still plays out in modern society, even though the context has changed dramatically.
Yeah. He even brings up the male ugly truth.
Okay.
A study suggesting that women consider 80% of men below average in attractiveness.
Wow.
It's a tough pill to swallow. But whether or not you agree with the methodology of the particular study, it does point to the pressures men face in a society that often equates attractiveness with worth.
And those pressures can be amplified in the dating landscape.
Oh, yeah.
Which is something that many in the Red Pill community talk about extensively.
Right.
It's like he's providing a vocabulary for men to understand and articulate their experiences.
Exactly.
Which can be incredibly validating.
So validating.
Especially when those experiences are often dismissed or ridiculed in mainstream culture.
Absolutely.
Okay, so.
Riker then shifts gears to another hot-button topic.
Okay, hit me.
The education system.
Okay.
And he makes a bold claim that it's failing boys.
He argues that schools, with their emphasis on structure and compliance, stifle boys' natural energy and instincts, leading to academic underachievement and lower self-esteem.
Right. He even goes so far as to call it a war on boys, arguing that the education system has become increasingly feminized, failing to cater to the unique needs and learning styles of boys.
He backs this up with some pretty startling statistics.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
He mentions that boys are more likely to face disciplinary action, be diagnosed with learning disabilities, and even drop out of school altogether.
It's almost as if the education system is set up to reward behaviors and learning styles that are more commonly associated with girls, leaving boys feeling alienated and discouraged.
I know a lot of parents, especially those in the married red pill community, share this concern.
Yeah.
They're worried about the messages their sons are receiving in schools.
Totally.
Messages that might contradict the values they're trying to instill at home.
Right, and Riker's analysis provides a framework for understanding those concerns,
Yeah.
or potentially even advocating for change. He's encouraging parents to think critically about the educational environment their sons are in and to be proactive in ensuring their needs are being met.
Now brace yourselves because Riker tackles a truly controversial topic next,
Ooh, what's that?
the wage gap. He jumps right into the firestorm, claiming that the wage gap is largely a myth.
He does.
He cites studies that control for factors like career choice education and work hours, arguing that when you account for those variables, the gap significantly shrinks.
Right.
So he's essentially challenging the narrative that women are systematically paid less than men for doing the same work.
Exactly.
This goes against the grain of mainstream feminist discourse, which often presents the wage gap as evidence of systemic discrimination against women.
You know, it's important to remember that he's presenting a specific perspective here.
Right.
One that might not align with everyone's views.
Okay.
But his goal is to encourage critical thinking and to challenge assumptions, even those that are widely accepted as fact.
Okay, so after tackling the wage gap, where does Riker take us next?
Well, he then turns his attention to another concept that's become ubiquitous in recent years, toxic masculinity.
Ah, toxic masculinity.
Yeah, that term gets thrown around a lot these days.
It does. So what's Riker's take on it?
He argues that the concept of toxic masculinity is a tool used to shame men for expressing their natural instincts and behaviors.
So he sees it as part of a larger effort to demonize masculinity.
Right.
And to make men feel guilty for simply being who they are.
Exactly. He ties this back to the double bind we discussed earlier. Men are criticized for being too masculine and not masculine enough.
It's a lose-lose situation.
It is.
It's like they're constantly walking on eggshells trying to figure out how to be a man in a world that seems to be constantly sending mixed messages.
And that sense of confusion and frustration is something that Riker captures really well throughout the book. He's providing a voice for men who are feeling lost and disillusioned, helping them to understand the forces that are shaping their experiences.
This has been quite a ride so far.
It has.
We've gone from the dawn of man to the modern-day dating scene.
I know, right?
Touched on everything from evolution to the legal system. We've got plenty more to discuss.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll be back soon for part 2 of our deep dive into the Iron Men.
Looking forward to it.
In the meantime, keep thinking critically. Keep questioning the narratives and keep those conversations going.
Absolutely. Picking up where we left off, let's delve deeper into how societal structures impact men's lives.
Okay.
This next section is particularly relevant for those of you navigating the complexities of marriage and relationships.
I'm ready.
Riker throws a real curveball when he starts talking about the feminization of men in media and advertising.
Okay.
He argues that men are increasingly portrayed as weak, incompetent, or even foolish, often overshadowed by stronger, more capable female characters.
Yeah, it's a fascinating observation.
Isn't it?
And one that aligns with what many in the married red pill community have been discussing for years.
Right.
You know, this portrayal of men can be seen as a subtle form of emasculation,
Totally.
chipping away at the traditional image of the strong, assertive male figure.
It is.
How does this tie into the idea of covert contracts that we talked about earlier?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
These media portrayals, even if seemingly harmless, can contribute to a shift in power dynamics within relationships.
I see.
When men are constantly bombarded with images of themselves as less competent or less capable,
Right.
it can subtly undermine their confidence and their sense of authority.
Even in their own homes.
Yes, even within their own homes.
It's almost like these media narratives are feeding into the very dynamics that the red pill philosophy is trying to expose and deconstruct.
Exactly.
Riker doesn't shy away from connecting those dots.
He doesn't.
He argues that this feminization of men in the media is part of a larger societal shift away from traditional masculinity.
Right.
A shift that he believes has negative consequences for both men and women.
And he's not alone in thinking that.
So we've got media portrayals shaping perceptions, and we've got these covert contracts playing out in relationships. Where does Riker go from there?
He then turns his attention to the family unit, specifically the role of fathers. He argues that men are biologically predisposed to be providers and protectors, and that this role is essential for the well-being of families and society as a whole.
This is an argument that's going to resonate with many in the married red pill community.
Oh, yeah.
Especially those who are fathers themselves.
For sure.
There's a strong belief in the importance of the traditional family structure with the father as the head of the household.
Right.
Riker's argument aligns with that belief system.
He does.
He even goes further, suggesting that the decline of the traditional family structure, with its emphasis on clear gender roles and male leadership, is directly linked to a host of societal problems.
He does.
He cites studies showing that children raised in fatherless homes are statistically more likely to experience negative outcomes.
Like what kinds of outcomes?
Including poverty, crime, and substance abuse.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
For sure.
But Riker certainly provides a lot of food for thought, especially for those who are actively working to strengthen their families and build a more traditional family structure.
Absolutely. Now get ready for this.
Yeah.
Because Riker then revisits a topic that's guaranteed to get people talking.
Oh boy, what's that?
The wage gap.
Again?
We know he's already argued that the wage gap is largely a myth.
Right.
So what does he add to the conversation this time around?
Well, he doubles down on his previous arguments,
Okay.
emphasizing that the wage gap narrative often ignores crucial factors like career choices and personal ambitions.
Okay.
He suggests that men are, on average, more likely to pursue higher-paying, more demanding careers, while women might prioritize work-life balance or choose professions that are traditionally lower-paying.
It's a perspective that challenges the idea that women are systematically discriminated against in the workplace solely based on their gender.
Exactly. And Riker is careful to acknowledge that there might be instances of genuine discrimination, but he argues that these are exceptions, not the rule. He pushes back against the notion that the wage gap is a widespread problem that requires systemic solutions.
It's a bold stance to take.
It is.
Especially in today's climate, where the wage gap is often presented as an undeniable fact.
But remember, Riker's goal is to encourage critical thinking and to challenge assumptions, even those that are deeply ingrained in our cultural discourse.
He's inviting listeners to consider alternative explanations.
Right.
And to look beyond the simplistic narratives that often dominate these conversations.
Absolutely.
And I know this next topic is something that many in the married red pill community have strong feelings about.
What's that?
Toxic masculinity.
Okay.
Riker doesn't shy away from this term either.
No, he doesn't.
He argues that it's often used as a weapon to shame and silence men.
Yeah.
To make them feel guilty for expressing their natural instincts and desires.
He sees it as a form of social control that seeks to suppress authentic masculinity. And this ties back to his earlier arguments about emasculation and the double bind men often face.
Right. He suggests that the concept of toxic masculinity is a way to pathologize traditional male behaviors to make them seem inherently problematic.
It's like men are being told that their natural way of being is inherently wrong or harmful.
Right.
Which can be incredibly damaging to their self-esteem and their sense of identity.
And Riker argues that this can have a ripple effect, impacting not just individual men, but also their relationships, their families, and even society as a whole.
It's a powerful argument.
It is.
And one that's sure to resonate with many who feel like the concept of toxic masculinity has been weaponized to silence men and to stifle open discussions about gender roles and expectations.
He's not saying that all male behavior is perfect or that there aren't instances of harmful behavior.
Okay.
But he's pushing back against the idea that masculinity itself is inherently toxic.
It's a nuanced argument and one that requires careful consideration.
For sure.
But Riker's not afraid to dive into these difficult conversations.
He isn't.
And that's what makes his book so thought-provoking. He's challenging readers to question their assumptions, to look beyond the simplistic narratives, and to engage in open and honest dialogue about the complexities of masculinity in the 21st century.
Okay, so we've talked about media portrayals, the role of fathers, the wage gap, and toxic masculinity. What else does Riker explore in this whirlwind tour of men's issues?
Well, next he delves into a topic that's often seen as taboo, especially in mainstream discussions about gender.
What's that?
The Me Too movement.
Ooh, this is a sensitive subject.
It is.
One that has sparked intense debates and divided opinions.
For sure.
So how does Riker approach it?
Well, he starts by acknowledging the importance of the Me Too movement in bringing attention to the issue of sexual harassment and assault, particularly in the workplace. He recognizes that these are serious problems that need to be addressed. Yes, there's a... Riker expresses concern about what he sees as potential for false accusations and a lack of due process for men accused of misconduct.
So he argues that the movement has created a climate of fear and suspicion.
Right.
Where Men are afraid to interact with women in certain ways for fear of being falsely accused.
Exactly.
He paints a picture of a world where men are constantly walking on eggshells, afraid to make a move or even compliment a woman.
Yeah.
For fear of being misconstrued or labeled a predator.
This ties back to his earlier arguments about emasculation.
Right.
And the ways in which men feel silenced or demonized in contemporary society.
It's a controversial argument.
It is.
And one that's sure to elicit strong reactions.
For sure.
But Riker's goal is not to dismiss the experiences of women who have been victims of harassment or assault.
Right.
But rather to highlight the need for a more nuanced and balanced approach to these issues.
It's a call for dialogue.
Yeah.
For understanding, and for finding a path forward that addresses the concerns of both men and women.
Riker then shifts gears and revisits a familiar topic, education. But this time he takes a broader look at the system as a whole, not just its impact on boys.
Okay, so we've already heard his argument that the education system is failing boys.
Right.
What's his broader critique?
Well, he argues that the education system, particularly in the Western world, has become increasingly ideologized.
Okay.
Promoting a specific worldview that often clashes with traditional values and beliefs.
He suggests that this ideological agenda is often embedded in the curriculum, the teaching methods, and even the school environment itself.
And he argues that this can have a negative impact on students.
Especially those who come from families that hold different values or beliefs.
He sees it as a form of indoctrination that seeks to shape young minds in a particular way.
Right.
This is a concern that I know many parents in the married red pill community share.
Yeah.
They're worried about the messages their children are being exposed to in schools.
Yeah.
Messages that might contradict the values they're trying to instill at home.
And Riker's analysis provides a framework for understanding those concerns and potentially even advocating for change.
So he's advocating for a more balanced approach to education.
Yeah.
One that respects diverse viewpoints and that doesn't seek to impose a particular ideology on students.
It's a call for educational freedom and for a system that values critical thinking, open dialogue, and intellectual diversity.
For those of you in the married red pill community who have gone through divorce or are contemplating it, this next section is particularly relevant.
Okay.
Riker takes a hard look at the institution of divorce and its impact on men.
He argues that the divorce system is fundamentally biased against men, leaving them financially and emotionally devastated in the aftermath of a split.
He cites statistics showing that men are more likely to lose custody of their children, are more likely to be ordered to pay alimony, and are more likely to experience a decline in their standard of living after a divorce.
He paints a picture of a system that often favors mothers over fathers, regardless of the circumstances of the divorce. He suggests that the courts often operate under the assumption that women are inherently more nurturing and better suited to raise children, even if there's no evidence to support that claim.
And he argues that this bias against fathers has serious consequences, not just for the men themselves, but also for their children, who are often deprived of a meaningful relationship with their fathers.
It's a form of systemic discrimination that needs to be addressed. He is advocating for reforms that ensure fairness and equality for both mothers and fathers in divorce proceedings.
This is a topic that hits close to home for many in the married red pill community.
I imagine so.
Especially those who have personally experienced the challenges and injustices of the divorce system.
Riker's analysis provides a framework for understanding those experiences and for potentially advocating for change.
Right. We've already touched on hypergamy earlier in our conversation, but now Riker dives even deeper into this controversial concept.
He reiterates his argument that hypergamy is a natural biological drive in women shaped by centuries of evolution and mate selection. He suggests that women are inherently drawn to men who possess certain traits that signify strength, status, and the ability to provide.
He argues that this biological drive, while perhaps beneficial in our evolutionary past, can have negative consequences in modern society.
Right.
Especially for men who might not fit the traditional mold of the alpha male.
He suggests that hypergamy creates a competitive environment where men are constantly striving to outdo each other in terms of wealth status and physical attractiveness. He argues that this can lead to a culture of materialism, superficiality, and even anxiety among men.
And he links hypergamy to the decline of marriage rates, arguing that men are becoming increasingly hesitant to commit to long-term relationships, knowing that they could be easily replaced by a man with more resources or status.
It's a provocative argument that challenges conventional wisdom about relationships and gender dynamics.
It is.
But Riker's goal is not to demonize women or to suggest that all women are hypergamous.
Yeah.
Rather, he's encouraging readers to understand the biological and evolutionary forces that might be at play in human relationships.
So he's providing a framework for understanding why men and women might approach relationships differently.
Exactly.
And he's offering insights that can help men navigate the complexities of the modern dating landscape.
Absolutely.
Now, here's a concept that's particularly relevant to the married red pill community, the covert contract.
Right. Riker dives into this idea,
Okay.
exploring the unspoken agreements that often exist between men and women in relationships.
So break that down for us.
Okay.
What does he mean by covert contract?
Well, Riker argues that these covert contracts are based on traditional gender roles and expectations.
Okay.
Men are expected to be the providers and protectors, while women are expected to be the homemakers and caregivers.
He suggests that these contracts were perhaps functional in the past,
Right.
when gender roles were more clearly defined and when women were primarily responsible for domestic duties.
Right.
But he argues that these covert contracts are no longer working in the 21st century.
Yeah.
As women have entered the workforce in droves and are demanding more equality in relationships.
And this is where the conflict arises. Men are still expected to fulfill their traditional roles as providers, but they're now also expected to be emotionally available, supportive partners, and even to share in domestic duties.
Yeah, it's a lot to juggle.
It is.
And Riker argues that many men are feeling overwhelmed, resentful, and even emasculated as they try to navigate these shifting expectations.
So he suggests that these covert contracts need to be renegotiated, that men and women need to have open and honest conversations about their expectations and needs within relationships.
And he emphasizes that this renegotiation needs to be based on mutual respect, understanding, and a willingness to compromise.
It's a call for a more egalitarian approach to relationships, one where both partners feel valued, respected, and empowered.
It's a message that's particularly relevant for the married red pill community, as many of you are already engaged in this process of questioning traditional gender roles and renegotiating the terms of your relationships.
Riker's analysis provides a framework for understanding the dynamics at play, and his insights can be incredibly helpful in navigating these complex conversations.
Now get ready for another controversial topic, because Riker dives into the nature of women themselves, a subject that's often tiptoed around in today's society.
Okay.
So what's his take on female nature?
Well, Riker argues that women are inherently different from men, both physically and emotionally.
Okay.
He's not saying one is better than the other, but rather that these differences are real and need to be acknowledged.
So he suggests that women are, on average, more nurturing, more emotional, and more relationship-oriented than men.
Right, and he argues that these differences are not a product of socialization or cultural conditioning, but rather are rooted in biology and evolution. He believes that these inherent differences between men and women has shaped our behaviors, our relationships, and even our societies.
He even challenges the feminist movement, arguing that it has done a disservice to women by trying to make them more like men. He suggests that this has led women away from their true nature and has created unrealistic expectations that ultimately lead to unhappiness.
It's a controversial perspective.
It is.
One that's sure to spark debate.
For sure.
But Riker's goal is not to put women in a box or to limit their potential.
Okay.
He's simply arguing that men and women are different and that those differences are not something to be ashamed of or to try to erase.
So he's advocating for an acceptance of these differences.
Yes.
And for a society that values the unique contributions of both men and women.
And this ties back to his overall argument about the need to restore a balance between masculinity and femininity.
Right.
A balance that he believes has been disrupted by feminist ideologies.
It's a thought-provoking perspective, one that challenges conventional wisdom about gender roles and expectations.
Now, here's a term that might be familiar to those in the red pill community.
Okay, what's that?
Red pill rage.
Okay.
Riker dives into this concept, exploring the anger and resentment that many men feel when they wake up to what they see as the realities of modern society.
He describes it as a kind of awakening.
Yeah.
A moment of realization when men recognize that the world doesn't work the way they thought it did.
Right.
That the narratives they've been told about gender and relationships might not be entirely accurate.
And this realization, according to Riker, can be a painful and disorienting experience.
Okay.
It can lead to anger, frustration, and even a sense of betrayal.
He suggests that this red pill rage is a natural reaction to feeling like you've been lied to. Like the rules of the game have been changed without your consent.
And it's a feeling that's often amplified by the challenges men face in today's society.
Yeah.
The emasculation, the shifting gender roles, the perceived bias against men in areas like family law and divorce.
But Riker cautions against letting this anger consume you.
Right.
He encourages men to channel their red pill rage into positive action, to use it as fuel to fight for their rights, to improve their lives, and to create a better world for themselves and their children.
He sees this anger as a source of energy and motivation, a catalyst for personal growth and societal change.
It's a powerful message.
It is.
One that encourages men to take ownership of their lives and to fight for what they believe in.
For those of you feeling overwhelmed by the challenges we've been discussing, Riker offers a potential solution.
Okay.
Going monk mode.
Okay, I've heard this term thrown around online.
Yeah.
But I'm not entirely sure what it means.
Sure.
What's Riker's take on going monk mode?
Well, he describes it as a period of withdrawal from the world, a time for introspection, self-improvement, and reconnecting with your true self.
Okay.
This can involve anything from spending time in nature to pursuing hobbies to simply taking some time for yourself to reflect and recharge.
He argues that going monk mode can be an essential part of the red pill journey.
Right.
Allowing men to step away from the noise and distractions of the world and to focus on their own personal growth and development.
He sees it as a form of self-care, a way to protect your mental and emotional well-being in a world that can often feel hostile or overwhelming.
It's a message that's likely to resonate with many men who are feeling burned out, stressed, or simply disconnected from themselves.
Absolutely.
It ties into Riker's overall message of empowerment, encouraging men to take control of their lives and to create a life that aligns with their values and aspirations.
For those of you feeling isolated or alone in your red pill journey, Riker offers another piece of advice.
Okay.
Building a tribe.
Sure.
He argues that men need to surround themselves with other men who share their values, who understand their struggles, and who can offer support and encouragement.
So he emphasizes the importance of creating a brotherhood, a community of like-minded individuals who can help each other navigate the challenges of the modern world.
Right. He suggests that this can involve joining a men's group, starting a business with other men, or simply spending more time with friends who understand what it means to be a man in the 21st century.
He sees this sense of community as essential for men's mental and emotional well-being, providing a sense of belonging, purpose, and camaraderie.
And for those of you in the married red pill community, this idea of building a tribe can be incredibly empowering. It can offer a safe space to share your experiences, to vent your frustrations, and to receive support from others who understand your perspective.
Yeah, it's a reminder that you're not alone in this journey.
Absolutely.
That there are others who share your concerns and who are working towards similar goals.
Now, for those of you ready to take action, Riker offers a powerful call to lead from the front.
Okay, what does he mean by that? What does it look like to lead from the front?
Well, Riker believes that men have a natural instinct to lead, but that this instinct has been suppressed in recent decades by feminist ideologies and societal pressures.
So he argues that it's time for men to reclaim their leadership roles, to step up and take charge in their own lives and the world around them.
Exactly. This can involve anything from starting a business to running for office to simply being a strong and present father in your family.
He sees leadership as an essential aspect of masculinity, a way for men to express their strength, their confidence, and their desire to make a positive impact on the world.
He's encouraging men to step out of their comfort zones, to embrace their natural leadership abilities, and to make a difference in the world around them.
It's a powerful message of empowerment.
It is.
One that challenges men to step up and create the kind of world they want to live in.
And finally, Riker encourages men to think about their legacy, about the impact they want to leave on the world. He argues that every man has the potential to create something lasting, something that will benefit future generations.
So this can involve building a successful business, writing a book, raising strong and capable children, or simply making a positive difference in your community.
Exactly.
He sees the desire to leave a legacy as a deeply ingrained aspect of masculinity, a drive to create something meaningful that will outlast your own lifetime.
It's a reminder that your actions have consequences, that you have the power to shape the world around you, and that you can create a positive impact that will ripple through generations.
This has been quite a journey.
It has.
We've covered so much ground, from the biological underpinnings of gender to the complexities of modern relationships, from the challenges of fatherhood to the power of building a tribe.
Riker's book is a treasure trove of insights and provocations.
Yes, it is.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
But we've got one more part to go.
That's right.
So stay tuned, because we'll be back soon for the final installment of our deep dive into the Iron Men.
Can't wait.
In the meantime, keep those minds open, keep those conversations going, and keep diving deep. Welcome back to our deep dive into the Iron Men.
By Conrad Riker.
Of course.
We've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
From evolutionary psychology to the complexities of modern relationships. But Riker doesn't stop there.
No, he doesn't.
He challenges us to look even further, to understand the historical forces that have shaped our institutions and belief systems.
This is where his analysis gets really interesting.
I think so.
Especially for those of you in the married red pill community.
Right.
Who are actively working to understand and renegotiate your own covert contracts.
Yeah, Riker argues that to truly grasp the dynamics at play, we need to go back in time.
Okay.
To examine the roots of Western civilization and how those roots have been impacted by various ideologies.
He specifically points to the influence of feminism and Marxism.
Right.
Arguing that these ideologies have in many ways undermined traditional masculinity and led to a decline in male leadership in society.
He suggests that these ideologies have infiltrated our institutions, our education system, our legal system, even our cultural narrative, shaping the way we think about gender power and relationships.
And for those of you who are trying to understand the origins of the covert contracts that govern your own relationships, this historical analysis can be incredibly illuminating.
It really can.
It helps connect the dots between the personal and the political.
For sure.
Showing how these larger forces have shaped the dynamics we see playing out in our own lives.
Riker encourages readers to examine the historical context of these ideologies, to understand their origins, their goals, and their impact on Western society. He's not simply presenting a black and white view of history, but rather inviting readers to engage in critical thinking and to draw their own conclusions.
So he's providing a framework for understanding the complex interplay of historical forces and how those forces have shaped our current reality.
Exactly.
And that understanding can be incredibly empowering.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially when it comes to challenging the status quo and advocating for change.
Now, as we wrap up our deep dive into the Iron Men, Riker leaves us with a powerful call to action.
Okay.
He urges men to embrace their masculinity, to reclaim their leadership roles, and to fight for a society that values and respects the contributions of men.
He challenges men to step up, to take responsibility for their lives, and to create the kind of world they want to live in.
Right. He's not advocating for a return to some idealized past, but rather for a future where masculinity is valued, where men and women can work together in harmony, and where traditional values are respected.
He encourages men to connect with other men, to build strong communities, and to support each other in navigating the challenges of the modern world.
He sees strength in unity and brotherhood, and in the collective power of men working together towards a common goal.
He leaves readers with a sense of hope.
Yeah.
A belief that change is possible, and that men have a crucial role to play in shaping a better future for themselves, their families, and society as a whole.
It's an inspiring message.
It is.
And one that I think will resonate with many of our listeners.
Well, there you have it.
That's it.
A deep dive into the Iron Men, Restoring Male Leadership in a Feminized Society by Conrad Riker.
It's been quite a journey.
It has.
Exploring controversial topics and challenging conventional wisdom along the way.
We've covered a lot of ground, from evolutionary psychology to the complexities of modern relationships. From the challenges of fatherhood to the power of building a tribe.
Whether you agree with all of Riker's arguments or not, his book offers a valuable opportunity to engage with the issues facing men in today's world. And to think critically about the kind of society we want to create.
If you're interested in exploring these topics further and diving deeper into Riker's analysis, we highly recommend checking out The Iron Men.
You can find it on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
And as always, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Our pleasure.
Keep those conversations going, keep those minds open, and keep diving deep.